Thank you again for joining me tonight to learn about increasing communication skills in children who have an autism diagnosis. My name is LaTosha Lafferty. I'm a clinical director in our Avon, Indiana Center. We already went over these tips about adding some things to the chat or the Q&A, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump into it. So Bierman Autism Centers is a place where young kids engage in play to learn foundational skills they can build on, such as self-advocacy and communication. We recognize that every child's success is unique, and our one-on-one approach allows us to drive progress using measurable outcomes while each child is advancing on their own terms. Our team is dedicated to making learning welcoming and fun by erasing the line between learning and play. Kids at our centers enjoy taking on new challenges and become motivated as they learn new skills. Our approach ensures children become confident and empowered lifelong learners. The Bierman Circle of Care and Support includes the whole family, not just the child. We empower parents through training and collaboration. Really quickly, I'm going to go over our pillars here at Bierman. So we let kids be kids. We accept every child for who they are, a very unique person. Learning through play is major for us. We're working with a lot of, most of our clients are pretty young, and so we want to erase the line between learning and play to keep children engaged and motivated. Empowerment is key. We use everyday activities to teach children foundational skills such as self-advocacy and communication. Engagement with families, we believe in the importance of building connections and working towards shared goals. And of course, commitment to progress. We are dedicated to each child's everyday and long-term progress. All right, so our agenda for tonight, first we're going to talk briefly about what autism is, the impact of communication challenges, since that is our focus tonight, types of communication, creating a supportive environment, and then strategies to increase communication. So first we'll talk a little bit about autism. So autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. Although autism can be diagnosed at any age, it is described as a developmental disorder because symptoms generally appear within the first 2 years of life. And so here I thought was a nice graphic about the autism spectrum disorder. And tonight, of course, we're going to be concentrating on communication difficulties. So the DSM-5 notes that people diagnosed with autism often have difficulty with communication and their interactions with other people, restricted interests, and repetitive behaviors. Symptoms that affect their ability to function in school, work, and other areas of life. And again, tonight we're going to be focusing on those communication difficulties that often come with the autism diagnosis. Okay, so first we're going to talk about some challenges, communication challenges. And we'll be looking at nonverbal communication, receptive language, and expressive language. Children with autism often face unique communication challenges that can affect their ability to express themselves and understand others. These challenges can vary widely among individuals, from nonverbal communication to difficulties with complex sentences. So thinking about expressive language, here we're thinking about making requests for wants and needs, labeling things in the environment, communication skills, of course. With receptive language, it's mostly related to understanding language that's being spoken to you. So that might include following directions, identifying objects, following safety commands like stop, wait, come here, walk with me, those kinds of things. And then nonverbal communication is related to things such as following gestures or understanding gestures, facial expressions, those kinds of things. So we're going to start here with verbal communication. I'm just going to expand a little bit. So challenges here includes difficulty using or understanding gestures such as pointing or waving, limited use of facial expressions to convey emotions, and then also avoidance of eye contact, which can impact social interactions. We'll talk about eye contact a little bit more, but I did want to point out here that not making eye contact isn't necessarily a bad thing. We don't typically advocate for forcing children to make direct eye contact because that can be uncomfortable, and it can cause problems down the line. It can make social interactions less desired if children are forced to engage in eye contact directly. So with that said, although it's not necessarily a bad thing, there's a lot that can be missed if someone does not learn to look towards someone's face when they're being talked to. So this might include missing important nonverbal cues, which can, of course, impact understanding the emotion of others or being able to express emotions ourselves. The impact here, nonverbal cues are critical for effective communication. Lacking these can lead to misunderstandings, as I just said. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about eye contact in particular as we go through this training. Receptive language is the next one. So this includes responding to name, understanding and following directions, identifying items, performing actions. So really think of receptive language as hearing something, understanding it, and then doing what you're being asked to do. And so some challenges with this, there can be difficulty understanding language, of course, struggling to follow instructions or respond to questions as well. And really thinking about the following instructions aspect. We have to, of course, consider safety as well. Sometimes kids who have an autism diagnosis may not understand safety. They might see something that they want to go and grab and kind of do that regardless of what kind of environment they're in. And if they don't understand what it means to stop or wait, or they're not able to do that when they're being asked to, then of course that can be a big safety issue. Let's see. Answering and responding to questions, struggling to follow instructions or responding to questions, misinterpreting the meanings of words or phrases also happens if there are deficits related to receptive language. Impacts here, receptive language difficulties can cause problems with following directions. Again, I just talked about safety, participating in various activities, including classroom activities. So it's really important to target receptive language and work on building that skill. And then next, we're going to really talk about expressive language. So this includes requesting or asking for things, labeling, making comments, conversing with other people, and really thinking about how expressive language kind of develops. It, of course, starts relatively simple, where you are maybe just learning how to ask for the things that you want, and gradually increasing, becoming more complex to the point where you can have back and forth conversations with other people. Challenges related to expressive language include limited vocabulary and difficulty forming sentences. Echolalia, which is simply repeating words or phrases instead of generating original speech. I think we work on echoing or repeating language with the kids that we work with. So echoing is not necessarily a bad thing, but not being able to generate original speech is definitely a challenge for many of our kids that do have an autism diagnosis. And then also Difficulty starting or maintaining conversations. Of course, if you're not able to ask for things, if you don't learn how to label things in the environment, it's going to be really difficult to have ongoing back and forth conversations with other people. Um, so the impact here, expressive language challenges can make it difficult for children to share their own thoughts and needs, which can, of course, lead to frustration. Okay. So here we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of communication challenges a little bit more deeply. So communication challenges, of course, can impact children in many different ways. Children may have social, academic, or behavioral challenges, and we're going to dive a little bit into those now. So social challenges, we might see isolation and withdrawal. Communication difficulties can lead to social isolation, withdrawal from peers. Kind of think about if you're not really understanding the language, so your receptive skills are underdeveloped or there's a deficit there. Um, it's going to be it's probably going to feel kind of scary to try and interact with other people if you don't really understand exactly what it is that you're supposed to be doing. And so, of course, it kind of makes sense that we might see isolation and withdrawal from peers. Misunderstandings, miscommunication can result in misunderstandings and conflicts with others. And then building relationships. Challenges in initiating and maintaining conversations can hinder the development of friendships. That's something that we want all of our children to experience. Find, other kids that they connect with, that they can learn from, share with, and those kinds of things. So we definitely want to make sure that we are addressing communication issues with the hopes that we can increase, building of those relationships with peers and such. Academic challenges, so participation, it can be difficult for children to participate in class discussions and group activities, following instructions, struggling to understand and follow instructions from teachers. And then there could also be challenges in expressing knowledge and understanding during tests or assignments, those kinds of things. These challenges interfere with children being able to learn in a less restrictive environment. And so we say less restrictive because in the ABA world, most often we are providing services one-on-one. So we have one child paired with one behavior technician, and they're working on a wide variety of skills. But when we think about children transitioning into school, in a kindergarten classroom, they'll have one teacher, perhaps an aide. I think most kindergarten classrooms usually have an aide as well. And then maybe 25 to 30 something kids in the classroom. And so, of course, when we think of it like that, a classroom is going to be a less restrictive environment than where we are providing services in that one-on-one kind of ratio. So at Bierman, we work toward graduation with each client and their family to ensure a successful transition into school from the onset of therapy. So we're always thinking big picture. What's the next step for this child? If they're going to go into a classroom setting, general education classroom, what exactly do they need? And we're working on those things from the very beginning. And I think probably across the board for all of our clients, depend kind of regardless of where they are, where their communication is, we're diving into increasing communication so that we can make sure that we are giving them what they need to be successful once they transition from our care. Okay, so next, behavioral issues. We see this quite often. Frustration from being unable to communicate effectively can lead to tantrums or other behavioral issues. I always use the example of for people who have vocal language, probably most adults in this training, if you've ever lost your voice, you know how frustrating that can be. The thing with that, though, is that as an adult, we have lots of different options or ways that we can fall back on as it relates to communication. So if I can't talk, I can't express things vocally, I, as an adult, can write down things and show it to someone. I can type, I can send someone a text message, I can send an email. I have lots of other alternatives. Not being able to speak will probably still be frustrating, but at least I have some alternatives that I can fall back on. Unfortunately, a lot of the kids that we serve don't have another functional form of communication. And so, of course, that can lead to lots of frustration, again, social withdrawal, those kinds of things. We might see an increase in tantrum like behaviors, especially if we're thinking of some of our younger kids that we work with. And we have seen, I've been in the field since 2004. I've seen this every place that I've ever worked. As soon as we start working on communication and teaching children how to express their wants and needs, typically those tantrum-like behaviors, that frustration decreases as their communication abilities increase. So that's a really important piece here. Other interfering behaviors, so there can be other things such as, like I said, those tantrum behaviors, maybe even like aggression. Those kinds of behavioral issues can come up due to lack of communication. And then alternative behaviors. Often children they do use alternatives. Unfortunately, those alternatives are sometimes not always desired. It might not always be what we want to see them doing. But our kids are smart, right? They learn really quickly. If I want this thing, if I start crying, someone's going to get it for me. And so they kind of learn that, like, okay, if I want a toy or if I want a thing, what I need to do first is cry for it. And so what we want to do is kind of teach the opposite of that. We want to hone in on those communication skills, meet kids where they're at, and kind of go from there. And like I said, we typically do see those interfering behaviors, frustration, those kinds of things decrease as we are increasing communication skills. Aside from challenging behaviors, of course, or interfering behaviors, kids might also learn to engage in, physical gestures in order to express their wants and needs. This is absolutely not a bad thing at all. And so kids might learn to, just point for a thing that they want, or reach for it, or grab, or maybe grab your hand and take you to the item that they're interested in. So we've got those as additional alternative behaviors as well. Okay, so the importance of early intervention. So if we think about all of those, the behavioral concerns that can come up, difficulties, making friends, being able to participate in a classroom setting or a less restrictive environment, interfering behaviors might come up as well. The importance of early intervention can't be stressed enough, because we know, or research shows, that the earlier intervention starts, the more success our children are going to see. So early diagnosis and support is really important. It can significantly improve communication skills. Little kids are really like sponges once they learn things, once they start communicating. Quite often in typically developing children and children who might have a diagnosis of some sort, they typically once they start communicating, we hear parents say things like, their language is just exploding. They're, learning new things all the time. They're saying so much, and that's what we want to see. We want to significantly and quickly improve communication skills so that they can learn as much as possible in these early stages, because again, they are like sponges. They're taking everything in. The role for parents and caregivers. So, of course, parents and caregivers play a very crucial role in supporting and fostering communication development. Um, at the center, we're doing all of these things that we're doing, and then we're communicating to parents, the things that we're doing in the hopes that they can carry that over at home. Of course, consistency is key for our clients. And so they're going to learn quicker, and they're going to generalize things faster if parents and caregivers are taking an active role in their language development as well. And then, of course, enough cannot be said about the importance of professional support and collaboration. So board certified behavior analysts, BCBAs who are overseeing the programs, speech language pathologists, and other professionals can provide tailored strategies, individualized strategies, and coping mechanisms and therapies for our children as well. Okay, different types of communication. So children may communicate in many ways. Children are often described as being verbal or nonverbal. And by this, people typically mean that the child either has vocal language or they're able to produce speech sounds, or they don't. In the world of ABA, we see communication as a behavior, and therefore we differentiate between nonverbal behavior and verbal behavior. So I'm going to just kind of talk about the differences here a little bit. So nonverbal behavior includes all forms of communication that don't involve words. So this can include gestures, facial expressions, body language, eye contact, and other forms of physical expression. Verbal behavior, on the other hand, involves communication using language, and it can include spoken words, sign language, writing, and other forms of communication that uses symbols to convey meaning. So when we say verbal behavior, we don't necessarily mean the ability to speak vocally. It's kind of broken down into like vocal, which would be spoken language, and non-vocal, which would be expressive, non-spoken language, such as those examples that I just mentioned, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those alternatives. So of course, we would just refer to this as different modes of communication. So of course, we have vocal language, we have non-vocal language, which again can be gestures or those kinds of things. Oftentimes when I have a child that is, on my caseload or in my center, and they don't have a functional form of communication, whether that's vocal language or otherwise, we might often start with using points, just having them point to the things that they want. We're pairing those things with vocal language, so we're speaking the words so that the client is hearing them. And we're reinforcing that and kind of just rolling with it. We also might use sign language or ASL. Picture exchange or PECS is another mode of communication that many of our clients might use. And then also speech generating devices. So this might be done on a tablet or some other electronic device where the child might hit a button and then the device speaks for them. Okay, so then we're going to talk a little bit about creating a supportive environment. So the importance for a supportive environment is really great. So in ABA, we're not setting out to change children. Quite the opposite. What we are doing is altering the environment that they're currently in so that it's easier for them to access what they need to learn, grow, and thrive. So we're going to dive into this a little bit more, and how you can arrange the environment to promote and increase communication skills. So a supportive environment provides the foundation for growth. It's crucial for fostering communication skills in children who have an autism diagnosis. It provides consistency, security, and the necessary tools for effective learning as well. And the positive impact here, it enhances the child's ability to communicate by reducing stress and anxiety. It also encourages more frequent and effective communication attempts. There are many different ways that this can be done outside of a clinical setting. So first, we're going to talk about routines and consistency. So creating daily routines to provide structure and predictability, using visual schedules to help children understand and follow daily activities, consistent responses, consistency and responses and expectations helps reinforce communication attempts. And then the use of consistent language and prompts to encourage specific communication behaviors is important as well. And so really what that means is we are, adjusting the environment so that we can make the daily happenings predictable. When kids know what's coming next, and we're speaking about those things and giving them that language, they may then learn to express those different activities and things that we're doing themselves. Again, thinking about reducing anxiety and those kinds of things. A lot of children who do have an autism diagnosis really thrive in structured environments. And so again, this is adding just a little bit more structure, which can, help them feel more comfortable. And if they are feeling more comfortable and less stressed or anxious because they don't know what is going to come next, that is going to help, that's going to make for a conducive learning environment. Reinforcing attempts to communicate.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'm doing the rude interrupting. We had some questions come in and I was thinking this might help. What does ABA therapy look for improving verbal communication?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Oh, sorry, and I apologize if my computer is being weird. Someone is asking, what does ABA therapy look like for improving verbal communication? They've had their son in regular speech therapy and not ABA.
Oh, okay. So I think, number one, it's going to look like play for many of our, the clients that we're working with. And this is important because this is how kids learn. We want to make sure that we're embedding learning opportunities in play. I would say a big difference between speech and ABA is, especially if you're in an environment where speech and ABA are collaborating quite often, like we do at Bierman, a big piece that can help increase vocal language or verbal communication more is that oftentimes, at least at Bierman, we are serving clients on a full-time basis. And so they're with us for quite a number of hours each week. And so if we have a client who is working on a certain thing in speech might be, 30 minutes a week or an hour a week typically. And ABA, if we have kiddos who are in our center 30 to 40 hours per week, we are giving them a lot more learning opportunities to work on those particular skills, whatever, goals the speech therapist has come up with. In ABA, we can work on them as well. And because we have most of our children for full day therapy, Monday through Friday, we just have an increased number of opportunities where we can work on whatever those skills are. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference. And the really great thing about being able to collaborate, I can go to my speech language pathologist and say, hey, I have a question about this thing for my kid that we're trying to increase vocal language. What kinds of things do you suggest? Particularly when it comes to like articulation and those kinds of things.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Sure, of course. Okay, let me jump to the next slide. Okay, so social interactions, facilitating play. So we want to encourage play activities that promote interaction and communication. Use toys and games that require turn taking, sharing, joint attention. Modeling social behavior is really important as well, because it's going to show children what the expectations are, or give them an idea of like, this is what you can do in these kinds of situations. We want to encourage siblings and peers to engage in inclusive play and communication with our clients as well. And this can be done at home, of course. Organizing group activities, plan structured group activities to provide opportunities for social interaction. Support the child in participating in community events, clubs, play groups, those kinds of things as well. The more exposure kids are getting to social interaction, something that I find kind of funny, but actually makes a whole lot of sense. I think a big reason that some of our kids who have autism maybe aren't terribly interested in playing with other kids their age is, and not always, because I of course have worked with some kids who are, social butterflies. They love everyone and, they want to be in the thick of it. But I've worked with a lot of kids who are just like, sure. I mean, I guess I'll sit here with you. But my theory behind that is that kids are smart. They learn really quickly. Like when I'm with this adult, I'm getting all kinds of stuff. They can reach stuff that's up high. They can, give me the things that I want, that I'm interested in. And sometimes another person who is my same size, right? If I'm a little kid, they can't reach my favorite thing that's up on the shelf. So I'm going to go to an adult who can, as opposed to going to another child who cannot. And so for that reason, it's important to work on those social interactions because kids can start to see value in playing with other kids and, learning from them, sharing with them. And when I say sharing, I mean sharing experiences with them. Visual supports. So incorporating visual supports like picture cards, visual schedules, communication boards can really help with communication development. Utilizing social stories, creating and using these kinds of things to explain social situations, expected behavior. Social stories are really great for that. And then, of course, tailoring social stories to specific events or challenges that the child might face. And so maybe it's like, we're going to a library today. This is Johnny's first time. He's not going to know what to expect. And so like utilizing a social story and those kinds of situations, again, can help because we can teach what the expected behaviors are. And then, that would include what those communicative behaviors need to look like as well. Labeling the environment, I think this is a really big one. Labeling items and areas in the child's environment to promote word recognition, as well as vocabulary development. Using clear, simple images and words for those labels are important as well. Keeping it simple, keeping it concise, but really drawing attention to the fact that, in this environment, there are all of these other things to look at and learn about and experience and play with. So labeling the environment can be really helpful in communication development as well. Next, okay, so I'm gonna just very, very briefly talk about positive reinforcement. I could go down a whole rabbit hole when it comes to reinforcement, but I will not, because we have a restricted amount of time. But positive reinforcement is so important. Again, when we think about, communication being behavior, and really knowing or understanding that reinforcement simply increases behavior. And so if we want to increase communication, we've got to reinforce it. So offer praise when children are attempting to communicate or successfully communicating, maybe even rewards as well. And thinking about, working with children, teaching them to ask for things, that reward would be the thing that they're asking for. So maybe they're hungry, they want I almost had a drink of water. You wouldn't maybe get water if you're hungry. But their favorite snack is goldfish crackers. They're hungry, they request goldfish crackers. You're going to praise that behavior, and then you're going to give them access to those crackers, and that would be the reward in that sense, or in a very naturalistic kind of sense. Increasing the child's motivation to communicate is really important as well. So we do use positive reinforcement to motivate the child to practice communication skills. And you can do this in a variety of different ways, such as, putting desired items up high so that the child has to say, like, hey, can you grab that for me? Or, doll, or whatever the thing is that's up high. You can very naturally increase their motivation to communicate if they don't have free access to all of their very favorite things all of the time. Celebrating progress, celebrating those small wins and milestones helps to build the child's confidence, and sharing achievements with the child's support network, or to encourage ongoing support and reinforcement is really important as well. So if you've got children at home and they're going to school, maybe they're going to an ABA center, or maybe they are, seeing, they have an outpatient speech therapist or occupational therapist that they see on a regular basis. Communicating those small wins to those individuals that are helping to continue to progress through the skills that they're learning, and the different environments that they might be in is really important. Because again, especially if you have a child who is super into, they like having attention from other people. It feels really good to get a hug after they've done, X, Y, and Z, whatever that thing happens to be. You're going to build their confidence, and you're going to be reinforcing those communication behaviors as well. So some strategies to increase communication. Here, so thinking about nonverbal communication. So this is what I was talking about when I said we'll talk about eye contact a little bit more. So as a clinician, I don't often directly teach eye contact goals with children in reference to forcing them to make eye contact with other people. It can cause issues down the line. It can be uncomfortable. It can feel weird. And that's not what we want to do. We don't want that social interaction to become a chore of like, oh man, I have to look this person, in their eyes the entire time that I'm, in close proximity to them or talking to them or what have you. However, I often do encourage eye contact by smiling, offering desired items, etc., when the child spontaneously makes eye contact. By doing this, I'm making myself more valuable to the child in those moments. And this, of course, can lead to increased eye contact in the future. Again, it's a behavior. And so if we're reinforcing it, it's going to increase over time. And so that's a way to kind of naturally increase eye contact without forcing direct eye contact with our children that we're working with. Joint attention often looks like the child engaging with an item and shifting their gaze toward you, toward other people, or toward other items. You can increase this behavior by reinforcing simply the shift in gaze. For example, if you're building, maybe you're building with blocks with a child, you can give them a few blocks, build with them. Once they've used all of their blocks, wait until they shift their gaze towards you. Again, it does not have to be direct eye contact, just more so like in your general direction. And then give them more blocks. When they do that, pair this behavior, so pair the shifting of the gaze with vocal language by saying something like, oh, you used all of your blocks. I have some more. Here you go. And so in doing that, if they kind of learn, oh, when I shift towards this person and we're doing something fun together, I might be able to get more of that fun stuff. You're going to reinforce that behavior of joint attention. Whoops. Sorry,
I have a question that came in that
okay.
Right where you're trying. When you say
Yes.
keep responses consistent, do you mean literally saying the same word for word phrases in response? We have a parent asking if they should be repeating the phrases back or trying to model different variations in the language. They say,
okay.
Yeah, no, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah. So yes, I think it depends on the child and where they're at. Sometimes you do kind of want to keep use the same kind of language or the same phrasing. And sometimes, you might want to expand on language. And I do talk about this a little bit later, and it might answer the question a little bit better because just to answer that question in general, my response is it kind of depends on the child and meeting them where they're at, and then knowing when to push a little bit harder to expand. So I think repeating, at least initially, if you have a child who has very limited language, you might start by just keeping things simple, using the same phrasing. And as they start to develop, you might want to expand that language that you're using with them. I think one thing to keep in mind is that with you, obviously, as the parent, you can kind of control what that looks like. However, when the child is out in the community, they're at school or, in other places, you don't have so much control. And so I think exposing kids to different kinds of phrasing and those kinds of things is definitely a positive as well. But like I said, it'll just kind of depend. I do talk about it a little bit more later. So hopefully that will give some more suggestions or some more thoughts about that. Let's see here. Okay, so gestures can be included with your vocal language or used without vocal language. Some examples would be holding your hands out to the child while saying, come here. So thinking about, working on like safety kinds of things. If you're out in the community, you want them to come back to you. Just saying come here maybe might work, maybe not. And so adding a gesture with that can help increase understanding of what you're expecting. Another example would be patting a chair while saying sit down. Modeling body language and facial expressions helps the child pick up on social cues from others. Exaggerated body language and facial expressions paired with vocal language can also help increase understanding. So I say, I don't know, I've been working with little kids for a long time. I often feel like really goofy and silly and maybe corny sometimes because I'm trying to, really over exaggerate the way that I am responding to them so that they are seeing the differences in the body language, in those facial expressions, even if I'm not explicitly like trying to teach them these different things. Okay, so vocal communication. One of the very best ways to increase vocal language development and expansion is to model and imitate vocal language. Regardless of the age of the child, they can learn to speak through their interactions with others. If they're making sounds, repeat or imitate those sounds back. If you're able to get a back and forth going with the child, you can then try changing the sound to see if they'll repeat the sound that you made. So if you have a child who maybe is babbling, maybe they're saying like ba ba ba, you can say that back and kind of imitate what they're doing. And once you guys have a back and forth, then you might try and changing it from ba to o or something like that, and see if they'll repeat the sound that you made. If you are able to successfully do this, so if you're able to get the child to repeat the sounds that you're saying, you're well on your way to expanding, you know, teaching them to develop that vocal language and then expanding that as well. If the child does repeat the sounds, smile, laugh, get excited, this will encourage them to continue the behavior. Expanding vocabulary and sentence structure through modeling. This can be done without requiring the child to repeat your words. And so, for example, if the child asks for apple, you can smile, you can repeat apple, and you can give them a slice of the apple. You can also expand the language by saying something like, apples are yummy, we eat apples for a snack. Those kinds of things. You're not necessarily expecting them to repeat all of those additional words, because that might be just way too much for them to vocalize. But you've now exposed them to more language that they can naturally include in their repertoire in the future. And so this is kind of what I was talking about in reference to that question. We can use very set language, but we can also expand. And even if the child maybe can't repeat 2 long sentences after they say that one individual word, at the very least, you've exposed them to that additional language, and they might naturally, again, include that in their repertoire. You can ask the child questions and enthusiastically provide answers. If they ask you questions, this will encourage and reinforce conversation skills, which again, we want them to find value and having that connection with other people, other adults, other children. So you can reinforce that behavior by kind of reinforcing their behavior of asking questions and then encouraging them to ask questions as well. When trying to increase communication, remember that each interaction is a potential teachable moment. The more opportunities the child has to communicate with you, the quicker they will learn to communicate with you. And so this is what I was saying with speech and OT. The great thing about that collaboration is if we're seeing the child for 30 to 40 hours a week, think of how many opportunities they have to work on whatever that goal is that came directly from the speech language pathologist. We get a lot of practice, a lot of trials, a lot of opportunities in. Research shows that using alternative forms of communication along with vocal language, so we're thinking having them point, utilizing sign language, picture exchange, those kinds of things can help children develop vocal language themselves. Part of that is because they're hearing that vocal language over and over again. So if I'm teaching a child to use points to communicate, and maybe they point at a car, I'm not simply giving them the car, right? They're going to point at the car. I'm going to say, oh, car, you want the car. Here's the car. And so each time that they do that, maybe they're hearing that word 2 to 3 times, maybe 4 times. If they're super into cars and that's what they want to do for an extended period of time, they might hear that word hundreds of times. And the more we're exposing them to that language, the more likely they are to develop it themselves. Let's see, obviously we can't force a child to speak. So giving them an alternative and then pairing it with vocal language allows them to learn how powerful it is to communicate while providing repeated vocal language models for them as well. Some activities at home. So one of the easiest and very best things that you can do to increase children's communication is to narrate everything, from regular everyday happenings to super fun play activities. An environment that is enriched with language helps children understand the importance of communication, the importance of that language. The more they hear language, the more they're likely to express it themselves. I feel like I said that a bunch of times throughout this presentation, but really that's what it all comes back to. Narrating, even if you're, just cooking or, maybe playing with dolls or something like that, even if they don't have that language yet themselves, you narrating, you're pairing that language with the activity, you're pairing that language with yourself. If it's super fun, then that's something that they're going to want to do more of, which again is going to give you more opportunities to model that language. And again, give them more opportunities to practice it and learn to develop that language themselves. Language games and toys. There are a variety of games and toys designed to increase language. You can literally do a Google search, and it might be like language development toys or something like that. You do want to make sure that you're meeting the child where they're at and expand by modeling appropriate language. Reading with your child, telling them stories encourages language development as well. It also helps to build strong relationships between you and your child. Imaginative play is a great way to expand language. Narrate throughout, even if the child is not yet speaking. So maybe they're, maybe they're building with blocks and you're saying like, oh, that's the red block is on the blue block, and those kinds of things. That's going to really help with developing that language as well. Technology can be a wonderful resource. There are many free apps and games that are educational in nature and can help expand language as well. So you can rely on those things also. Collaboration. So it's really important to have a collaborative, supportive team that you're working with. This might include parents, caregivers, teachers, other providers such as, speech language pathologists, board certified behavior analysts, and teaching aides, paraprofessionals, though anyone who is, rooting for the child to do well. You want to have as many people as you can, kind of working toward the same goal with the child. You want to make sure you're setting realistic goals and tracking progress. You can, write down, he said his first word today. Yesterday I heard, 3 words or something like that. It's really great to look back, especially when kids are doing all kinds of complex, fantastic things. Looking back and remembering there was a time when he wasn't yet talking. And now look at everything that he's learned and how he's grown, over this period of time. You want to open regular communication with your child support team as well. Some key takeaways and points. There, of course, are many different ways to communicate. You want to meet children where they are, capitalize on those teachable moments, increase interactions with the child, model appropriate language, reinforce attempts and successes at communication, and collaborate. Okay, we have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
So if there are any questions, please feel free.
There's a few questions that are in. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Wonderful. Is 8 years old too late to see the benefits of therapies?
No, I talked briefly about early intervention, but I think at any point I've worked with clients personally who have come to me at like 12, 14, and they've not, done much as it relates to therapy in the past. We are definitely able to see success and progress across the board with clients. So I would definitely say 8 is not too old. Um, the more therapies that you can provide, the better, the more progress you're going to see. So I would say at any point, if you're thinking, this might be beneficial, look into that, get some resources, and see how you can move forward.
Thank you. Do you have any recommendations with regression on communication? Sometimes their son is saying phrases 1 week and 1 month later, he's just doing noises.
So I would say for some of our kids that can be typical. For some of our kids, maybe not so much. So definitely you would want to make sure that you're collaborating or, informing his pediatrician. If, the people that are on his team, make sure that you're giving them that information. I think, like I said, sometimes it does happen, but just kind of remembering those different strategies, trying not to get frustrated in those moments, and continue encouraging language development is really going to be the key there. Ideally, or hopefully, some of that language regression, some of that language that they lost will come back with continued strategies, therapies, and those kinds of things.
Thank you. I think we have time maybe for one last question. Is technology recommended for those under 2 years?
I think it depends. There's a very real concern of young children being kind of overstimulated by technology. But I do think that it can be helpful. I don't think that, like, I've worked with families who were like, absolutely not, we're not using iPads and those kinds of things. And I think that that's perfectly fine. There are lots of other different ways. There are educational apps. I would say if you're going to use them, try and not let it be like a free reign. Here's your iPad, go, entertain yourself for hours kind of a situation. And instead, maybe something that you're doing together with the child, because I've definitely seen situations where a child is exposed to technology, maybe at a very young age, and it's really difficult to transition away from those things. But I do think that they can be useful.
Thank you.